Let me introduce tonight's guest. Welcome to my back porch. Today's porch guest, her name is Aimee Reid. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about something that we all pass through, but don't always understand until much later. It's called childhood. Aimee is a children's author who, like many of us, as a child found her way into books early, disappearing into stories whenever she could find them. But for many children, stories are not just imagination. They are places of safety, places of comfort, places where something inside of them can finally settle. Aimee now creates those kinds of spaces for children through her own writing. So tonight is not talking about writing as a career. It's about what children feel, what they carry, what makes children feel safe, and how stories can sometimes hold what the world around them cannot. We're going to be talking about childhood, emotional safety, imagination, and how people sometimes turn their own experience into something that creates safety for others. Aimee, welcome to my back porch. Oh, okay. What are you drinking?
I am drinking lemon ginger tea from one of
You
my
know,
favorite mugs by Sarah Bonneman. And I don't know if you can see it, but you can kind of hold it, it's molded as though hands are holding it,
oh,
sort of in a
really?
heart shape. Yeah. So,
Everybody that I invite on to do this one, it's like I'm the one sitting here drinking a cup of coffee and everybody else is drinking tea. And I'm like, okay, maybe there's a secret out there that I haven't figured out. Kiddo, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it greatly. Um, Listen, let's start it off this way. Tell us who Aimee is. Like, who is Aimee? How did Aimee get to be Aimee? And what is the path that Aimee walked?
I grew up in Ontario, Canada. I haven't lived outside of the province. I was a very introspective little child, kind of quiet. I loved anything to do with books, reading. I wrote in we had a little, you may remember this, Darren. I had anyway, a little sort of journal that chronicled my school years. And each grade, we could write down what we wanted to grow up to be. And I wrote, under kindergarten, I wrote teacher and mother. So I grew up to be both of those things.
Okay.
Um, I became a teacher of English, music, and special education for high school. And I had three kids. They're young adults now. And then when I came home to raise my kids, I started reading picture books to them, as one does. And I remembered my love of reading and writing as a kid. Actually, I also wrote little stories from about grade one on. So, something my daughter said sparked an idea, and that became, led me on my path to be a children's author, which is what I do now. So yeah, I loved. My family had a little subscription to beginner books, book club from Random House. So I learned to read on those
Book
books.
clubs, you're probably still registered for it and trying to get off of it.
So these books would come every once in a while. It was quite magical for me. And I can still really see and feel that moment when the package came and I could open the cardboard and there would be the Cat in the Hat, or Green Eggs and Ham, or Hop on Pop. So I learned to read with those books. And then the rest of my life has kind of been about connecting with people and about books and about reading. Yeah. So, I remember going to the big school library when my teacher found out I could read and seeing all those books and thinking, oh, wow. I said, how many can I take home? And that kind of a love for books has stayed with me.
So, I mean, let me ask the really boorish kind of big people question and whatnot. If you're going to write books, why not write real books for, the New York bestsellers list? Why kids books? Why children's books?
It's just what my heart is drawn to. There's nobody saying I won't ever write a book for grown-ups. Writing for children, is important to me because children are important. They're new, they're new around here. I can say, hey, welcome, and companion them in some way through my books and through what I do, through my school visits, etc. So much of who we become is beginning to be formed when children are young, to come alongside and point out what's good about the world, and that includes them.
Why?
Why write for kids?
Why do you? Like, I understand obviously cognitively why you do it, but why is it important? Why do you notice it? Because I got to be honest, I wake up in the morning and then the last thing that goes through my head is, oh, I need to spend some time writing for children or investing in children. So why is this so important to you? Let's assume nothing's by accident. Why?
Yeah, for sure. If I imagine myself as a quiet little child who's observing the world, who has lots of questions, who has lots of curiosity, who might not be saying everything I'm wondering, it's important for me to write what I might have needed to hear, or to write what, other kids might benefit from hearing. Frankly, what probably we all as grown-up kids might need to hear, which is, you're important. You are valuable. You matter in the world. And look over here. Isn't this something amazing? I want my books to have a sense of, I guess, wonder about them, to have a sense of play, and to have a sense of welcome. Hey, who are you today? What are you feeling today? That's all welcome. That's all okay. Fred Rogers, someone I admire, talked about feelings as important work. And I think that my books give that sense to kids that, hey, what you're feeling today, no matter what it is valid. It's important. You can tolerate feelings that are painful or uncomfortable. You can move through them. We don't have to push them down like a beach ball and try to hold them down. We can sort of let them float up and just be there on the water and be with them. And I hope in some way the experience of reading books can do that, can be a friend. That's the title of my Mr. Rogers picture book biography. You Are My Friend, the story of Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood. Something I admire about him, if I may, is that he was truthful with children. He talked about things like war, and his goldfish died, and he was able to take those experiences and just say, hey, we can be together with this experience. And he also pointed out, what was good about the world, what was hopeful about the world. And to me, that's, I guess, something I feel like I have learned to do in my life, and I want to share that with other children.
It's interesting you talk about Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers down in the States. Here in Canada, we had Ernie Coombs, Mr. Dress Up. Both of them, they actually, from what I've understood, grew up and studied together and worked together for many years before they sort of became iconic figures, children's figures,
yes,
in both Canada and the United States. What I find fascinating about them now as I look at them from the adult perspective. So, of course, when I was a kid, you watched Mr. Dress Up, you watched Mr. Rogers. As a young adult, and probably as a parent for those many years when I was raising children, I kind of saw those men as people that played with kids. Since then, and particularly as I've got older, I remember Mr. Dress Up when he passed away here in Toronto. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people came to his funeral, and people lined the streets as the hearse drove by. And it started to dawn on me that these men were actually a very profound sense of human genius, in the sense that they truly understood that they had a role in the development, not just of children, but in the development of the future, the development of future psyches, future thought processes, future creativity, future. And I was actually and am very much taken right now with the profound impact of individuals that work on children. What I, for the majority of my life, perhaps was seeing as something kind of cute, oh, isn't that nice? Now I'm looking at it going, no, cultures need Mr. Dress Ups. Cultures need Mr. Rogers, almost like it's their role to fill in what some of us parents with, loose parenting skills can't. When you write a story and you say that you are trying to tell children that they matter, why?
I think that nobody is suffering from too much appreciation these days,
Mhm.
and too much genuine acceptance. So many of us can use that message ourselves. When I researched that book, I was struck by how many people had their own experience of Mr. Rogers looking into that television camera. He had such a way of connecting with the individual, even though he was working in mass media.
Mhm.
And something that he would say would be exactly what they needed to hear at that moment in their lives. That's true for most of us. Most of us, we don't get through childhood, young adulthood, through the world unscathed. The world has broken places. It has sharp edges, and it's also full of beauty, and it's also full of goodness and hope. And there's something about a person who is unafraid to just be present, to really attend. And there's something about, Fred said that he just imagined talking to one child. And I think a sense of that somehow came through. He was listening the same time that he was talking and looking into that camera. Most of us can use that message of being enough, being valuable, just for existing in the world, that we don't need to prove anything. We don't need to perform to a certain standard. We don't need to feel a certain way in order to be loved, to be valuable, to be accepted. So that is, the heart of what I want to do.
It's interesting. Certainly, as we get older, and certainly is the language right now all over social media and whatnot, everybody's talking about needing to heal the inner child within us. People are talking about needing to address childhood traumas or needing to fill gaps that perhaps were not addressed by our parents, or addressing generational trauma that played out on us on very formative years. And so what's been going through my head lately is, why do we see childish things as so childish when in reality the rest of us are going to play out our lives? This entire world is running right now by individuals who were shaped and formed in those formative years of childhood. And something that you just said, and you say that Mr. Rogers said this, but I'm going to bring it back to you. Something I needed to hear at the right moment. What are you sensing that children need to hear right now? And what is that moment? And what is it, that message that you're saying?
Yeah, what a good question, Darren. I think about these things too. There's so much that's out of our control. And that doesn't just go for children. I mean, children are helpless in a particular way when they're born, I'm sure if we could imagine what they might be asking, it might be, am I safe? Right? And as they get a little bit older and they're individuating and they're trying to figure out in those terrific 2 years, who am I versus you? Maybe one way to characterize that is, am I seen? Am I seen for who I really am? And then I think also of, as they get older, and I think this continues through our lives, am I sufficient? What power do I have? When things are feeling topsy-turvy, when things are feeling unsettled in the world, it's good to come back to those basic questions. And I love the way you frame this, because those, childhood questions stay with us. So when the world feels unsafe, what can I do in this moment? Yes, there's a lot out there that I can't control, geopolitics, etc. What can I do to feel safe in this moment? Who are safe people I can be with? What do I need to say to myself? Children have the developmental tasks that they have to address themselves to. And as adults, sometimes I find in parenting, and maybe you do too, and in writing for children, we can bump up against something and think, oh, that hurts a little bit. Like maybe I see, oh, you know what? I feel a little pained when I see my child deal with perfectionism, let's say. That's a little bit tender for me too. What if I can imagine a child that needs that reassurance that you don't have to get perfect on every test, right? What would that child need? What does my child need? What does my student need? What does my grandchild need? And how can I, by my attunement and my non-anxious presence, how can I be that for that child? And how can I be that for myself?
Or your own inner child.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more we can not be afraid of those feelings, the more we can say, oh, there's a loss there for me, or that's a message I need to hear, and do our work of reparenting ourselves, of saying, what can I do to provide that safety, to provide that acceptance? Many of us have that inner critical voice, right? Mm-hmm. What can I do to reframe that so that I am changing the way I talk to myself, so that I'm noticing and I'm being more gentle with myself? I'm not taking that on board as the only way to think. And when we are able to do that, and we're able to self-regulate and to self-soothe, then it's natural for us to be able to extend that to other people, children, grandmas, the man in the grocery store, the guy who cuts us off in traffic. We can carry that forward in small ways in our lives. So that sense of agency, I think, is really important.
You know what is going through my head right now is I'm just kind of thinking, and lately, I have to be honest, I'm sensing energy in things that perhaps have been very mundane in my days. So let me give you an example. When we read a child a book, what's really going on in that situation is not only is there a story, not only is there a message, not only is there an impartation of an emotional energy, you have a recipient child that is sitting there being formed by the words that are on this piece of paper. But there's also a mom or a dad or an aunt or an uncle or an older sibling that's reading that book that is also being imparted by that energy that's going on in that moment. When you write, is that impartation of core energy, security, is it a part of your thought process?
Yes, absolutely. Not that the books are didactic or like written to teach something. I suppose thinking about helping children feel a sense of wonder, a sense of self, a sense that they're valuable. And I hope that that comes through just in the moment that the adult and the child are together on the couch. The child's on the lap, they're reading together. That in itself is an important message. You're saying, hey, here we are together. We're just going to have a cocoon. We're going to read. We're going to spend this time together. And I also think that, and this has come back to me from people that have read with their children, sometimes books can be a way for parents and children to say things to one another or to
Mm.
experience something. So,
Wow. 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 Wow.
for example, my first book, my daughter said something at bedtime one day that sparked an idea for me. She said, "When I grow up and you grow down." And I thought, wow, how fun is that, right?
Mhm.
And then I started remembering other kids when I was a kid talking about age as though it were this malleable thing. And I thought, I think that's fun. I don't think I've seen anything like that. So that book became, actually was put out by Random House Children's Books. So that was a fun full circle moment for me because, it was part of this big publishing company that had brought books to my house. And in that book, there is a mom elephant and a little elephant. And the little one is imagining that he's big and he's able to care for his mom in all the ways that she's cared for him. So every time he is dreaming about being big and getting her snacks from the tree or teaching her how to swim or looking after her, she affirms his character and his competence. So it's sort of this dialogue in most of the book. And a mom and a daughter came up to me at a reading and said, "Oh, we just want you to know how much we love Mama's Day with Little Gray." And I said, "Oh, I'm so happy to hear that." And the mom said, "Yeah, we've memorized the lines just from reading it over and over. And so we say them to each other spontaneously."
Wow.
And she asked the little
What a
girl,
compliment.
right? She asked the little girl, "What's your favorite line?" And she said, "I know I'd feel safe." And so that was beautiful for me because, we put these things out into the world like seeds. We don't know where they will fall or where they will flourish. But in that mom and daughter's conversation, at the end of the day, they had found a way to share that connectedness and that warmth, and that carried through into the rest of their days. And that really meant a lot to me. That feels like the heart of what I'm trying to do.
It's interesting, and we've talked about this with other guests that have joined us here, that in a world filled with chaos, many times most people have learned to not feel. And we've learned to push down very aggressive scenarios. We've learned to push down traumas. We've learned to push down difficult situations. We've learned to push down a lot of emotions. But when we push down the bad ones, we also push down the good ones. And what was interesting is I've seen this in a number of the conversations, talking about how people often don't have a reference point when it comes to what does safe feel like.
Mhm.
And now we joke about it and we talk about my porch here. And we will talk about, how I love when people could come and visit us and we just sort of have this safe place where we laugh, we sing, we talk, we cry. But what I'm hearing when you talk right now is that you are using other medium to create a safe place that people are referencing, and you literally, as you said it, you touched your heart going, "Oh, she said that we feel safe." And it's like that is an incredibly powerful tool, or it seems like an incredibly powerful tool and reference point to impart in children's, to have a center of, I know what safe feels like to work from. That is freaking profound.
I agree. For any one of us, through our presence, through just being a consistent, caring person in the world, we create safety. We extend safety to one another. I feel safe looking at you with your fire in the background. And that is far more powerful than we realize. Really appreciate what you say about not always learning how to deal with those painful emotions or scary emotions. If I may reference Fred Rogers again, he said, don't, people have said don't cry to other people for years and years. And all it has ever meant is, I'm too uncomfortable when you show your feelings. Don't cry.
Hmm.
I'd rather have them say, go ahead and cry. I'm here to be with you. At any time we listen and we create a back porch for someone else to kick their shoes off and really let us know what's going on inside, we are changing the world. We are changing the world
Absolutely.
for that person.
And I genuinely am saying, because I'm having this reflection right now as we're talking, I'm realizing how foolish my sort of adult thinking of childish work is childish, or maybe not as consequential as I'm realizing, when I'm realizing right now as you speak, this is profoundly formative of cultures and structures and families. It is an investment. I mean, that's easy to say, an investment in the future,
Right.
but it is an investment in the character of the future. How about yourself? When you were a kid, what was your favorite book?
Ah, so I had a lot, read a lot. One that comes to mind, it's so interesting as I was thinking, in preparation for our chat, I was thinking, okay, I think themes of what I found comforting or interesting show up in my work, and that makes sense. There was a
Mhm.
book I loved called Come Over to My House, and it was kids from all around the world, showing a little bit about their lives and saying, come over to my house, come over and play. Wherever you go, you will hear people say, come over to my house, come over and play. And I loved that, I guess, sense of welcome and invitation. I loved imagining, being a child in Venice. What? They have boats on their streets? Like, that was so cool. So it opened a window for me. We talk in Kids Lit about books being windows and mirrors. So a mirror is something that shows us a little bit more about ourselves, that validates us and validates our experience. And a window is an opening onto the rest of the world. And it helps us think about new ways to be, or other possibilities, or other people's experience. And I think that book was a window book for me. So I see that theme of welcome a little bit. And, one of my books is called Welcome Home. And it's people in the family, and then extending out to the broader community, welcoming a new baby. So I do think that that book stayed with me, as did others that I enjoyed.
And when you hear or bump into like this mom and daughter that have read your book, what does it make you feel? Now, I'm not asking what emotion it triggers. You have every right to be proud. You have every right to be conclude and feel success. But what do you feel when somebody comes up to you and talks about the book that has touched their life?
I feel something warm right here. I feel um, I feel a deep joy. I think I share in that sense of safety in that moment. They're telling me something about themselves. I'm responding to that. I feel connected and grounded and safe and warm. Um, it makes me think of another moment when I was reading that book to some junior kindergartners and kindergartners in the city where I live, and I finished reading it, and it closes in this peaceful scene, and they're, and the little guy says, if I grew up and you grew down, I'd want to have a day just like today. And it's just a regular day, they're
Right.
just being together. And I finished, and I put my elephant puppets away. And all of a sudden, this little girl broke from the crowd and ran up and hugged my legs. And I, having been a teacher, I thought, we don't want to stampede. Um, so I just kind of pat her on the head. And I was also conscious about, I don't want kids running to just hug anybody, right?
Right.
And sure enough, a bunch of other little friends ran toward the front. And so I said, okay, everybody, I have one more thing. I have a great idea. And that Mama Elephant puppet is this big folk manus puppet that looks safe and warm and motherly. And I said, okay, now it's really good to get a hug from safe people, but we don't always have those safe people with us. So what can we do when we feel like we need something? We need a hug. And so I said, okay, can you put your arms around yourselves like this? And can you give yourself a big hug from Mama Gray and me? And then everybody did, we did some hugging. And that kind of heart safe feeling that I have and that I hope people have when they read my books, that, that cozy feeling when you like, maybe you have a nice blanket or you're on your back porch with your tea or your coffee and you just feel safe in that moment. That's that kind of human safety and connection is what I feel through people when they say they respond to my books and what I hope they experience when they encounter them.
When we talk about artistic expression, artists, creative individuals are trying to convey an energetic sense. And that's why exactly I'm asking you, what is it that you feel? Because obviously that's what it is that you're trying to convey. And that's what it is that you're looking for as payment, if you will. It's like, I know I've conveyed it when I get this marker in my body.
Mm.
How has this creative process formulated, completed, healed, soothed, and developed you?
What a great question. It continues to do that. And I think we bring our questions, we bring our experiences to whatever we do. I'm working on a piece right now, I guess feels a little bit current. It's when things are feeling a little bit shaky, when there are influences that affect our lives in real ways that we can't control. Well, what can we do? And it's using the metaphor of seeds, actually. So seeds are powerful. They look tiny. And we don't always know what they'll produce. And we don't have control over what they'll produce, but we can choose. We can choose to share them. We can choose to plant them. So it's an instance of me reflecting on, again, themes of agency, themes of dealing with our emotions and finding our place, finding our center, our place of purpose, our place of hope, and leaning into that. So whatever I'm, processing, I think this is true for pretty much everybody, and certainly for writers, I think, whatever I'm processing is going to come out in my books, and not in a preachy way, but in an imaginative way. And think imagination is powerful. We talk about child's play, right? That's child's play, almost in a derogatory sense. Well, child's play is really important work. Imagination is really important. People might think of it as an escape. I think of it as important work. It's more like a passageway, so we can move in our imagination from this moment to create something in our minds that is different, that is, hopeful, that is peaceful, that is secure, that is safe, that is powerful. And then we can come back to this moment and move forward. Can I imagine a world that is peaceful, where everybody is regulated, where people accept one another? Can I imagine that? What would that be like? What would that feel like? What would that sound like? Okay, how can I bring that into my life? What's the next peaceful action I can choose?
It's interesting. A couple of years ago, I was the director of one of the local art galleries, and we were having conversations with the town and the local Board of Education with regards to cutting funding for arts programs and for creative programs, for sports programs. And my job was to advocate for the importance of these programs. And the approach that I took was that what we often forget is that when we are having our children sit down in an art class, that this is not just about the kids, making a painting that gets stuck to the refrigerator, but this is about developing certain parts of our psyche and mind that later on may not be an artist, but it may be an entrepreneur, it may be an innovator, it may be an inventor. It may be the person that creates the cure to cancer because a certain part of their creative brain was turned on. Thus, the same when it comes to music. You know, obviously, the importance of people learning patterns and mathematical patterns in their mind and using parts of our brains, and sports, the ability to connect our brain to our body and connect with other individuals. As somebody that works predominantly with children, what do you say to sort of these entities or the individuals that maybe would see a lot of the things that we do with children as not important? Why is it important? Or maybe it's not.
These are good questions, and I like the way that you approach that, Darren. You know, we think of, okay, there's safety needs, there's physical needs, kids need food, they need water, they need shelter. We think of those things as being important, and of course they are. Mm-hmm. And we also need connection to people. We need to be able to develop ourselves. Kids need to be able to develop themselves into who they are meant to be. I once read a metaphor of parenting as gardening as opposed to architecture. And that came to my mind when you were talking. And I thought, okay, you know, rather than trying to craft a child in a certain image, can I pay attention to this person in front of me? What does this person need to flourish? And as we do that with each child, as we do that with each other as adults, we are growing something beautiful in the world. So it's maybe not as immediately obvious when we give children exposure to music, to the arts, to play, to sports, etc. But we're doing something foundational that does shape our world. And I love that you identified that.
You could speak to parents. If you could say something over the internet that went viral right now that you could, as a mom and as a children's writer, say to other moms and dads and parents and teachers or whatnot, what is something important that we need to remember about our children?
What I would most want to say to the grown-ups that care for children is thank you. Mm-hmm. And I hope that you recognize the important work you're doing when it's the 5th time you've swept Cheerios up off the kitchen floor.
6th.
And nobody's had a good sleep, and you're trying valiantly to tie those shoes to get to the doctor's appointment. I hope that you feel valuable. I hope that you recognize how incredibly important you are to the world and to the lives of the children around you and in your care. We talk about, you know, valuing children in our culture, and I think we do to a certain extent. I also think we don't pay enough attention to how incredibly foundational time spent with children is. So just by being yourself, by being a regulated, caring presence in a child's life, you are doing something infinitely valuable. So that would be what I would really hope that parents would hear. You matter, and it's important that you be gentle with yourself, that you say, how am I doing? That you check in, just like we want our kids to feel valued. It's important that you feel valued. And then, you know, extending that to the kids in our care becomes just an outgrowth of that good work we're doing to nurture ourselves.
You are a grown-up big people. And if you could take all of the wisdom and the insight and everything that you've learned and experienced and known and tripped over and walked through and walked over as you are the person now, and speak to little Aimee, what would you say?
I would say, wow, I like you. You are so cool. Look at you reading those books. You don't know it, but man, I'm going to like you even more as you grow up. There's so much good ahead of you. And I think that I would want her to do what I try to practice in my own life, which is to look for the good. We all probably have heard Fred Rogers encouraging people when kids are scared of the news, when bad things happen, and they do happen. So we can acknowledge that. He passed on some advice his mom shared for him: look for the helpers. And there have been so many helpers in my life and in the world, and I would want her to know that all that joy and security and delight and wonder that she experiences in books, someday she's going to be able to pass that on to other kids like her, and that is going to be an amazing feeling. I hope that little Aimee would curl right up on my lap and we could share a story together, and that would be pure joy.
So I'm going to take it a step further. What would little Aimee say to you now?
Now, that's a great question. I think she would say, really? Really? Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I have so much to look forward to. I saw teacher, I saw mother. That's what I wrote in my kindergarten journal in school, that I wanted to grow up to be. And those are very good things, and they're still a part of me, and they always will be. I didn't really think about somebody writing books for kids to give kids the kind of joy and meaning and companionship that I experienced with books. So I think she would be like, oh, I can't wait.
So before we go, do you have a copy of your most recent book with you beside you? Let's see your book and let us know where we can find this. I'm trusting we can get it on Amazon, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So show us your book, tell us your book, because we're all running out to buy a copy for our kids and grandkids.
Okay, well, I have to give a little shout out to little Freddie Rogers here. This is You Are My Friend, the story of Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood. And I mentioned it a few times, so I feel like I have to give a little shout out. And then the newest ones are all kind of similar. There's A World of Love, and it talks about the ways that animal parents care for their kids. So it's, now that I think about it, Darren, it's really germane to our conversation. What do animal parents do to provide care for their kids? And then these two were inspired by experiences with my own kids. Animal Snuggles is that physical affection, and then Baby Animals Trying is cheering kids on, looking at the animal milestones that kids have. So they all really center on celebrating children for the important work they're doing, and highlighting that sense of connection and warmth that I talked about.
Aimee, we're going to make sure that everybody knows your Instagram account so everybody can follow you as we finish up here. One of the things that I always try to be cognizant of and share whenever I have a visitor with us is what it is that I was sensing and feeling as we're talking. Now, I've known you for much longer than what we're talking tonight, so this is not difficult. When I think of Aimee Reid, and when I look at you talk, and when I look at you shine about what it is that you were created to be, the words that go through my body is gentle genius. Gentle genius. And I say that in utter admiration for something that probably does not get the due credit that it is deserved. But all of a sudden, I'm certainly realizing it's like, this is a big deal, investing in the makeup, psyche, and development of our children. So there you go. I think of Aimee Reid. That's the way it gets written down in my journal tonight. Gentle genius.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate that very much and certainly hope that I'm a gentle presence in the world for people.
Aimee, thank you so much for taking time for us tonight. We appreciate it. I know you're busy. I know you have a lot of things going on in the world around you, but thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight. For everyone that has joined us tonight, you are welcome to rewatch this video again. Find it on our YouTube channel under the tag name @the_Porch Club. You'll be able to watch this video again or share it with other individuals. We look forward to seeing you every Monday night here on my back porch as we talk with really incredibly impressive people about things that we didn't always realize are so incredibly important. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You have a lovely night. Good night.